So welcome and introductions. Brief introduction to IRM and GRC. And then from there, we're going to jump directly into a case study, talking through what the state of California was able to do, and then also a live demo. We're going to follow that up with some tips and tricks on how to get started, and then we're going to finalize it with answering any of the questions that have popped up during the course. As you ask questions, as we see them, we'll go ahead and interject those. However, if there's any that we did not have time to get to or we didn't address yet, we'll address them at that time. So with that said, we're going to jump right into the introductions. Because I'm speaking, I'll just very quickly, my name is Cliff Harris. I'm a risk sales executive for ServiceNow, and I'll pass it off to Vivian Yan.
Hi, my name is Vivian Yan from FTB. I'm the Information Security Oversight Manager, and my team was heavily involved in the GRC implementation. Glad to be here.
All right, Brian.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Brian O'Connor with Veteran Enhanced Technology Solutions. We're a ServiceNow firm and an SLP State of California contract company. Our mission, just to highlight quickly, is as a firm is to transition underserved communities into IT, and we do so as a ServiceNow next-gen partner focused on government and healthcare. Happy to be here this morning.
Fantastic, thanks, Brian. And this is the other Brian Risman from Edgile. We're an elite implementation partner of ServiceNow, specifically in the risk and security space. As a firm, we've been serving customers for over 20 years as it relates to their GRC and security programs, their identity and access management programs, as well as their cloud security programs. So we were fortunate to partner with vets in ServiceNow and Vivian and her team on the implementation of the case study that we're going to be talking about today, and very much looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
All right, perfect. And we're going to start this discussion by actually giving a very high level overview of ServiceNow. And so we will jump right into that. And as we bring this up, we assume that if you joined, you have at least a base understanding of ServiceNow. But really what makes us special is the fact that we have a platform that we then build everything off of. And as we build things off the platform, it allows the enhancements to the platform to trickle out to it. So different things such as virtual agents allowing you to report loss events, being able to have a mobile experience for your business continuity disaster recovery. All of these different things on the platform feed into the GRC/IRM system and allow us to really do some incredible things. Also, as you notice here with our IT workflows, our employee workflows, our customer workflows, and our more creative workflows, that data resides in a very single data model in one database. Because of that, you're allowed to take things that are being done by one particular part of the organization, and it can easily apply to others. And this could be everything from bringing in vulnerabilities and then having that change the way that you score things on a BIA or business impact analysis and disaster recovery, to also, as you have customer service issues, having that come back and implement or show how a policy was not implemented correctly. The power of the platform is what really allows us to shine. And as we go into the risk specific areas here, that really starts showing up. Now we have 7 core things that we do, and I'll give you a very brief sentence on each one. And I know you're not here to hear this, you're here to hear what's happened at the state of California. So I'll be brief here, but the policy piece is how we actually manage policies, allow policies to come together, be published, edited, retired, and then also allows your staff to attest to them as well as request exceptions from them. A lot of our customers have started looking at how to use back to work policies and that attestation feature so that they can push out what new work rules would be or how to actually safely do things in returning to work after COVID, and then having a signed attestation by the employees. On the compliance, we bring in various data sources for authoritative sources, normalize those controls into a single control set, and then allow us to go out and ask one question that then satisfies many different authoritative sources. And we're going to hit on that a lot today during the conversation. On the risk side, usually it's 1 of 2 things. You have a risk register that you're using KRIs in order to track the performance of that risk, or you're going out and performing risk assessments looking to identify risk to add to a risk register. Business continuity is my all-time favorite. It's very straightforward. It's your business impact analysis, and then how you're actually going to create your disaster recovery plans, your continuity of operation plans, test, and then activate in a crisis. Vendor risk management is going to be the due diligence that you do before doing work with a vendor. So first doing an initial tiering to determine if they have citizen data, if they have access to employee data, protected health information, things like that, all the way down to, are they just providing facilities or some type of office supplies, tiering them to do the proper amount of due diligence, and then actually performing that due diligence, collecting things such as certificates of insurance, SOX 2 reports, SIG questionnaires, etc. Audits the internal audit capability to define auditable entities, do an annual risk assessment, and then track the performance and cost of doing your audits. And then privacy is actually making sure that you're, in this particular case, it could be patient, citizen, or employee data is protected. From that, we also have quite a few things that our partners are doing, and we're going to hear quite a bit about that with the vets and the Edgile team today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Brian Risman, and we'll go ahead and jump right into the case study.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Cliff. So I'm going to get us going on the case study. Vivian's going to join me in the conversation, and then what we'll do is once we get through some of the content here, we'll then turn it over to one of my colleagues from Edgile, one of our senior directors, who is one of our lead architects on the ServiceNow platform, Will Matthias. We'll have the pleasure of working with Vivian and her team on the implementation, and he's going to take you through a sanitized version of some of the processes and use cases that we're going to talk through here. So with that, from a case study perspective, one of the approaches that we use to help get State of California FTB up and running was one of our quick start approach and capability. We'll talk a bit more about that as we talk about getting started, if you will. But those quick starts that we have allowed us to really help, get FTB up and running, in just over 3 months, with the capability. And that included from helping support standing up, the ServiceNow environment and instance, all the way through to supporting in the testing and the training activities. It was a combined team of working very closely with the vets folks, as well as with the Edgile certified resources to do this. And we worked with a variety of stakeholder groups from an FTB perspective, including the team from a CMDB perspective, Azure Active Directory, security, privacy, and the safeguard team. I imagine most of you are familiar with Franchise Tax Board, but for those of you who are not, from a quick introduction perspective, the California Franchise Tax Board's mission is to help taxpayers file tax returns timely, accurately, and pay the correct amount to fund the services important to Californians. There are approximately 6,000 employees in the FTB organization. They're headquartered in Sacramento. And as you can see here below, some of the statistics as it relates to tax collected, individual taxpayers, and corporations served. Now, if we start to look at how we took those quick starts from Edgile and vets and were able to support addressing the use cases that FTB was looking to realize in ServiceNow, here are the 6, if you will, use cases that we worked through. The first one was harmonizing the laws and regulations, including mandates that are specific to the state of California. We do this by an accelerator that Edgile has called our Automated Regulatory Compliance Content, also known as ARC. It's a ServiceNow certified application on the store. So if you were to go to store.servicenow.com and type in Edgile, you'll see all of the content packs there. And we're able to use that as an accelerator into the quick start. We supported an IT risk register, the system security plan management process, the privacy threshold assessment and privacy impact assessment management process, the plan of action milestone or POAM processes, as well as the CMDB integration. We'll unpack a handful of these in the coming slides here. So as we start to do that, I'll first start with the harmonized laws, regulations, and frameworks. I mentioned Edgile's ARC content, which stands for Automated Regulatory Compliance. And in that content library, there are over 500 authority documents. So think of industry-specific laws and regulations, state and local mandates as well, including information technology, privacy, and business mandates. Some examples are the ones that you see below here listed, including the California SIM 5300 A and B, some specific California Franchise Tax Board policies as well. We were able to onboard into that library as well. So you can see the synergies between a client, in this case, FTB's policies and standards, and how they line up to the authority documents that were in scope. So the approach is for us to take the authority documents and that content, if you will, to break those into citations. So what's called bite-sized chunks, if you will, verbatim text coming from those laws and mandates and regulations. We then harmonize all those citations together into what we call integrated requirements. So it's taking 35,000, if not more, citations and harmonizing those into an integrated requirement. There's about 250 or so integrated requirements in the library. And with those integrated requirements, there is what is a control objective coming out of that, married with the risk statement. So I know a lot of organizations are striving to get integrated risk and compliance, if you will. And this is the ability to do that by having a harmonized requirement of a control objective driving compliance, a risk statement supporting risk management, all linking back to the laws, regulations, and frameworks. And in this case, the onboarded California Franchise Tax Board information security policy and standards. That's how we got them up and running from a content perspective. I'm now going to turn it over to Vivian to talk in a bit more detail about some of the other use cases. Vivian?
Hey, thank you, Brian. System security plan, privacy assessment, and the POAM, we created those workflows more specifically to FTB's process. So system security plan is a security assessment of an information system. FTB designed and implemented system security plan management workflow because as a state agency, we are mandated by SAM 5305 and the SIM 5300A. And of course, for a tax organization, we also mandated by IRS to have system categorizations and the data classifications for all information systems. For the state departments that have received military department assessment or CDT OIS audit, probably you're familiar that this is one of the control that's being assessed and audited. So for an organization at our size, we have hundreds, close to thousands information systems in our environment. So integration with CMDB is essential for this effort. So thanks to Edgile and VET, so we were able to have a smooth connection with Azure AD and have integration with CMDB. So in GRC, we built two system security plan templates. One is extended version and one is short version. For the critical systems containing confidential data, we will use extended system security plan template. And for network devices or for low risk applications, we'll use a short version. So for the state agencies, CDT OIS office already published two both versions, and probably you could be able to get a template from them. System security plan workflow contains several steps such as introduction, corrective actions, reminders, recommendations, and conclusion. After the conclusion, the system is certified. So we also designed annual recertification for critical systems. So the system security plan will be reopened annually or sometimes biannually for system owner to update any modifications. So most importantly, analysts will have a chance to create issues from the assessment evaluation, and those issues will be managed through the POAM workflow. So I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides. Next one. Privacy assessment, privacy as important as the security is also mandated by the SAM 5310.8 and the SIM 5310.c, and most importantly, IRS Pub 1075. Privacy assessment included PTA, privacy threshold assessment, and also PIA, privacy impact assessment. PTA mainly include the type of the data that's being collected: name, SSN, date of birth, driver's license. For us, tax information, or FTI, federal tax information. So those are important data element. And for PIA, that covers how the data are being protected, the protection of data. So we made a special design in our implementation that for in all the information systems, PTA is included in SSP, System Security Plan template. Why? Because we don't want to go to system owners twice, and they have to complete 200 questions system security plan, and then immediately we go hit them by another PTA, say, hey, now you need to answer privacy questions. So we combine the PTA and the SSP in one template for the systems, for information systems. But for business process, the PTA and the PIA will be completed by the business owners. So this kind of design will help streamline the process and make the whoever complete the questionnaire make their job easier. So for the privacy assessment, assessments can be viewed on dashboard or assigned by emails to individuals. And they can reassign to somebody else to help them. So warnings are generated if potential gaps are identified. And the management report and the dashboards are available for CSO and the Chief Privacy Officer all through the ServiceNow dashboards. Next one. So now I get into the POAM slide. POAM represents plan of action and the milestones. It is a NIST term, and it's also used by CDT when state agencies submit their quarterly information security vulnerability updates. Currently, the CDT POAM submission is in Excel format. In the future, we are hoping to create APIs to integrate with our GRC with state risk management solution and to automate the POAM submission. But for our POAM implementation, it's at the working level and contains all the details and the plans. So in GRC, POAM is called issues. So in the next, when we're gonna demonstrate, you will see the screen will show issues, but actually it's our POAM process. POAM is our compliance management workflow to manage control failures. And also we create findings from system security plan assessment or findings from external audit, for example, from OIS or CMD, or and also our independent security assessment will create findings and create issues in GRC. That's our POAM management plan. So the workflow contains security analysis, privacy violation, policy violation, justification, and response from the system owners. They will create remediation plan. And then we come to an agreed upon schedule, how much time it takes for the system owner to remediate the vulnerabilities, to fix the issues. And it will go through the whole approval process. Will be approved by the security analyst, the system owners, and the bureau directors who owns that system, and a chief security officer. But for the critical findings, it will go all the way to CIO. Once it's approved, it goes to the autopilot mode for the system owners to remediate the vulnerability following the agreed upon plan. And we also have the activity logs where we can put working notes and comments in the individual issues page. So the workflow include new goes to respond, review, approval, in progress, and then it's closed. The whole process also will have a good impact on the compliance dashboard on the GRC solution. So once we are able to close individual issues or findings, our compliance score will go up. hopefully over time, we're able to bring up the overall compliance for our agency. So next, I'm going to pass this to Brian for a live demo.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vivian. That was extremely valuable. That was great information. So I'm just going to get us ready for the demo. We're going to jump into a live environment. It's an Edgile demo environment just to make sure we're all in sync. So it's all sanitized information in here, representative, if you will, of the processes that we just went through. The use cases that we're going to highlight in the demo is we're going to bring to life for you those harmonized laws and regulations, including those specific state mandates. We'll show you what that looks like in the system. We'll then bring to life the IT risk register, the SSP process, the privacy threshold, and privacy impact assessment management processes, as well as the POAMs. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Will, who will transition us into the ServiceNow demo environment.
Thanks, Brian. I'd like to start with a compliance dashboard. This dashboard shows compliance against some key authoritative source documents. So these documents represent some California regulations and standards that need to be followed. The bar graphs are showing what controls have been implemented for each of them, which ones remain to be implemented, and which ones are partially implemented. This has an interactive filter, which would allow us to select from a list of various applications or organizations. If we drill into this state agency example, we'll see the graph update and show the details specific for this agency. This also can be drilled in. So if we look into this particular set that's not been implemented, we can see that there's really only two controls that are where our team needs to focus to improve the compliance for that particular authority document. Pulling the covers back a little bit, I'd like to show you that control framework that we talked about, the ARC content. At the base of this is a list of all of the documents that are in the library. And one of these documents is this state administrative manual. So if I go in and look at the details of that manual, I'll see that I have things such as a URL to the direct source of it. But one thing that's really valuable is you'll see the breakdown of that document into these 200 plus records. These citations are individual mandates. And by breaking them down, that allows us to accurately map the controls so that we know what section of this document needs to be met on each control. If I pick one of those citations, just go into one section, you can see the verbatim text exactly as it was in the document for that particular mandate. A really valuable piece then is to tie it to our harmonized framework. The control objectives, if I look into that particular control objective, one of the things that we can see is that all the other citations that need to meet that particular secure data storage control can be found. So this would include across several different documents that are in the library, things like PCI, NIST, IRS. So this supports the test once and comply to many strategy that is very efficient. Another key element is the baseline control procedures. This answers the question of how the organization has decided to address all these multiple sources to implement this particular control. So all those citations are gone through and synthesized into this baseline. Multiple options are provided to allow different types of entities that need to have to support this control to know which one of these baselines to use. If we then look at the fact that we've got these control objectives mapped into the risk statements, we can see that there's risk categories and risk topics. This is a 6x26 framework that we've created to allow roll-up of all these risks so that very high-level reporting can be done. If we jump into the risk dashboard, we can see this roll-up and see what open risks are out there and which controls and risk areas they're involved in. We can also see the difference between the inherent and the residual risk. You'll notice that the residual risk is lower. This is showing the payoff, the benefit from the investment that your organization has made in controls. This has resulted into a 52% reduction in the risk that is being seen. If I jump in and see that there is another tab, this is particularly showing the risk for the residual risk. It has counts. It has a graph showing you the breakout from an impact on likelihood standpoint. Also, it will show you across entity types. So this can help you see the risks for, say, business services or applications or vendors. This also supports an interactive filter so that when you dive in, you can see the risk for that particular state agency as it's changed. I'm having a technical problem, I apologize. I'd now like to talk about the security assessment. So this would be a record that would be created by an analyst. It would be assigned to a user. The appropriate type of assessment template, in this case, we're doing an extended SSP, would be selected. And then this assessment would be sent off to the assigned user to answer. This would be available in an email, but also the user has access to a portal like this, where they can see all of the assessments that have been assigned to them. They can also see what issues are out there assigned to them, what controls they're dealing with. Once they navigate to the assessment, this would be what it would look like. So this is a fresh assessment, and there's a menu that allows us to dive in to the different categories. Starts off with simple questions like, what is the system title? This is the included privacy threshold assessment, which would allow people to determine whether additional privacy concerns exist. This extended assessment also includes sections around NIST controls. So these sections would allow the user and people that you share this assessment with to determine whether the controls were implemented, provide some comments, and has an extensive list of NIST controls that it tracks. This is what it would look like when it had been submitted and returned to the analyst. The analyst now has the ability to go back and look at that assessment, review the answers provided, put comments in the assessment. If need be, return it back to the person that was assigned to for corrections. Ultimately, they would put their analysis in, some comments, and move it through the approval process. One of the steps would be to create an issue. The issues represent the POAMs. We'll get into more detail with that next. We'll start with this issues dashboard. This allows the organization to track all the issues. You can see them based on what different type of issue they are, whether they're in progress, and it also has a similar interactive filter so that you can narrow in and see issues pertaining to specific groups. This is the detail for POAM. This form, also started by the analyst, would be starting in the new phase and would be assigned to a issue owner, a bureau, a section, and then it would be moved into the response phase where it would be expected that that issue owner would now have to decide whether to remediate or accept. If they accepted, this would result in either a policy exception or a risk acceptance. And ultimately, if they decide to remediate it, they would have to define their remediation tasks. These are the milestones in the POAM. In this example, we have where they've done a partial remediation, been able to close that, but they're still in the process of fully remediating this issue. I'd like to now show the privacy assessment. This is very similar to the security assessment. One thing that is very helpful is that when it's first sent, the user only sees the threshold assessment. They're only asked questions to help determine if there are privacy concerns involved with their system. If they indicate that they are, they will see additional questions and categories appear where they can now provide more details about their system. This process, very similar to the security assessment, would result in the analyst getting to see those results, go through the same process of responding to them, making issues, putting in comments, and ultimately going through an approval process. Part of the end result of the assessment would be a report. And this report shows all of the information gathered in these assessments. So this includes the comments that have been made, the issues that were added, all the details of what questions were asked and what answers were provided. Such a report can then be turned into a PDF or can be added as a knowledge-based article within ServiceNow. This allows this assessment to live on after the assessment has been completed. So I'm going to return this back to Brian.
Fantastic. No, thank you, Will. That was fantastic. And I see we have a handful of questions coming in right now. So Cliff, I didn't know if we wanted to address a few of these as we're coming off the demo while it's fresh in folks' mind.
Yeah, definitely. So first question is, obviously you guys did the implementation. However, did you provide any functionality or content here?
Absolutely. So the content that you're seeing, we mentioned earlier that automated regulatory compliance content, otherwise called ARC, and where Will showed those authority documents of over 500 sources, broken down into citations and then mapped to a framework of control objectives and risk statements. You know, that's Edgile content, if you will, that's available on the ServiceNow store. It can also be procured directly as well through ServiceNow, you know, that's and or Edgile. So that was, one of the things that we brought to the table. But from a functionality standpoint, I think that was also one of the questions, Cliff, as well, was around, out of the box versus, not. What we were working with, though, for the implementation was all of the natively available functionality coming from ServiceNow IRM. And then the reason I say that way is that a lot of that natively available functionality is configuration driven, if you will. So we supported working with FTB to understand their requirements and then configuring the system accordingly. And that's a big distinction between configuration and customization. We did not customize anything that might cause challenges from an upgrade path and from a from a sustainability perspective that required code or breaking any of that. So it was all natively available configuration, and then we aligned the requirements, if you will, and then configured accordingly.
Yeah, one other question too is how long baseline did this take?
Yeah, you're actually setting up, maybe, Will, if we progress to the follow-on slide, if you will, and I'll talk to your question there. But we were able to do this in just over 3 months, about 3.5 months to get up and running. And one of the reasons why we were able to do that, in a relatively swift period of time, if you will, was because we also leveraged our quick start configurations to go do that. So Edgile's come to the table not only with the content that seeds ServiceNow natively, if you will, through the ServiceNow store, but then also from a project approach standpoint, we have a quick start approach where we've identified and documented all of the decision points and put those on templates that need to be made. So when we did a requirements workshop, for example, we would sit there and we know these are the notification options, these are the reporting options, these are the workflow options, these are the approval options, et cetera. So we knew the inventory of requirements and configuration decisions that had to be made. We bundled those into quick starts, if you will. So we then delivered the project using that quick start approach, if you will, where we were not starting with a blank sheet of paper, and being able to get up and running in the 3 to 4 month time frame, was enabled through using that approach.
It makes sense.
Fantastic. And while we're here, this is maybe a good transition while some other questions potentially come in. We have a couple slides to really think about how to get started here. Hopefully, we had a great experience working with the FTB team. I know they're excited about, what they were able to achieve. Hopefully a lot of you, having listened to Vivian and seeing what Will, what was demoing, likely are excited as well. We have some just thoughts, if you will, as it relates to how to get started. The first thing is, select, a partner and how to get moving. ServiceNow provides fantastic technology. They have a great partner ecosystem that ourselves and vets are fortunate to be a part of. And one of the things that I think where we found a lot of success, and I know our customers have, is finding a partner that, is really focused specifically on these use cases, including GRC and IRM and the other, security and risk domains, if you will. Because there's a lot of nuances there as it relates to the need to focus on keeping this out of the box and configuration based. We then talked about the content a lot, as well as those quick start configurations. So that certainly is something I think that accelerated our ability to move as quickly as we did. One thing to also think about as well is, being smart. ServiceNow is a platform, and Cliff really in the beginning of the call spoke about the power of that platform, and that we're really just focusing here on the IRM module, but there's connectivity and should be connectivity to the rest of the ServiceNow platform, whether you have a mature ServiceNow platform or just beginning on that journey. So there's a lot of opportunities to connect into the CMDB, for example. We started with some of that, on this project. There's the application portfolio management capabilities, there's IT service management, IT business management, et cetera. And we want to make sure that you are thinking smartly about where are the right hooks and opportunities to connect in data from across the platform, or at least build a roadmap to drive that connectivity and automation. And then the fourth thing here is, is really about domain expertise, if you will. We were bringing folks to the table who have, decades of experience, if you will, specifically in these information security domains. We have previous CISOs that are colleagues of ours, Big Four partners, and then, architects like Will, who've actually built his own GRC tool, about a decade ago, but is really having a great time now, really focusing on configuring and bringing to life ServiceNow. Kind of the next thing to think about on the follow-on side is once you kind of think through the partner approach to help make sure you're successful, is then what is the approach from an implementation standpoint? We all recognize that the resources are limited, if you will, as it relates to risk and compliance programs. However, everyone desires a great deal of precision and confidence on that journey. So, acknowledging that this is a journey, if you will, and that, there are incremental steps and wins that you can take. This is an approach that we've used, what we call our 5-pass approach, to help folks get on that journey. So today, we showed you the risk register. That was that harmonized set of laws, regulations, and frameworks, including clients' own policies and standards harmonized into that as well, to build an integrated risk and compliance risk register. What we call pass 2 is that's what's called an applicability matrix. And those were those entity types and entities that Will showed in the demo. That's the marrying of those requirements and those risk statements and control objectives, to the operating environment. So which applications, infrastructures, business units, processes, services do those risk and control requirements apply to? And that's applying that out. And that allows you to get to that granular level of reporting. You saw that dashboard that Will started with, for example, when we talked about compliance, if you will, with various mandates. You can drill down by entity type and saying, well, if I care about this application, how am I compliant versus another application? And that's driven through that pass 2 setup, if you will, of modeling out that operating environment. Pass 3 was, very similar to what we showed with the SSP process, the privacy processes, and really the follow-on POAMs, plan of action milestone processes, and that's what we call diagnostics. Think of those as surveys, attestations, and the workflows to request and assess and get information, capture, and then provide information back, report on the issues or findings and the POAM process, and the follow-on actions to remediate. And from there, you should have a pretty good understanding of, where is the highest level of risk, in the organization. And that's really where you reserve your passes 4 and 5 for deep dive assessments and more detailed evidence-based control testing. So here's an example of an approach that we've taken folks on, and it might look familiar to some. Please.
Quick question. Yeah, quick question for you here. If you were going to be doing vendor risk management as well, would it fit somewhere in one of these passes, or would it be a completely separate effort?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cliff. And I'm going to kindly ask you to move 2 slides ahead, Will. And this is an example of bringing this all together, if you will. So what's great about vendor risk management is that vendor risk management can really be run in parallel or independently of risk and of core IRM and GRC if you would like, or it can be done in a way where you're kind of connecting the 2 of them up, when you're ready to do so. So actually, a lot of folks start with vendor risk and then come back to their GRC journey. Some folks do it right after. It's nice in that it's a containerized capability, if you will, of assessing your external parties or your third parties or end parties and vendors, if you will. And it can be done really at any point. But the neat thing about it is, thinking about the synergies that you can find. Findings is a great one as an example. So if you wanted a common findings or issues register, and then you would be able to manage the issues, more internally identified as well as those externally identified. And that would be something where we see a lot of synergies between the 2.
Yeah, got it. And one other question that kind of came out is, are you able to export things into different formats or different templates?
Absolutely. Well, do you want to maybe address that question there?
Certainly. So ServiceNow has a fantastic capability for importing and exporting, supporting different file formats, data formats, also whether that's automated or manual, and the sort of gold standard of an integration that happens in real time. All that can be done with ServiceNow.
Perfect. And really what the point of this slide is trying to do is to kind of piece together where everything fits together. So if you kind of look at the top of the slide where you see that corporate governance and oversight, you'll see that content library, that ARC that we spoke about before. There's your corresponding regulatory change management solution that ServiceNow and Edgile also have as well. There's the risk register, there's the applicability matrix that I spoke about on the previous slide. And that's really that top of the house, if you will, governance, oversight, content piece. Then that applicability matrix, thinking about modeling out the operating environment, that's that middle layers. What is your business hierarchy and your entities? Think about your enterprise, your risks, your business units, your services, applications, et cetera. And then bottoms up are all then the capabilities and services that you're looking to bring to life, within ServiceNow. So we really focused in large part today on the left-hand side of risks and compliance, or IRM. But vendor risk management can plug into there. Business continuity and resiliency, another module, which is part of ServiceNow's risk portfolio, can be wired in, as well as the security operations capabilities from a vulnerability response and security incident response perspective. And they would all leverage that common business hierarchy and entities, as well as kind of the guiding, North Star, if you will, of the content, laws and regulations, of your risk register, of your policies, et cetera. I know there was also a question related coming through around ARC versus some of the other content offerings out there. So ARC is the same in the sense that it's a subscription content service, if you will, but it is a different service provider that we're providing here, than some of the other offerings that may exist, if you will. One of the things that we focus on, if you will, with our ARC content from an out-of-the-box perspective is really the harmonization of risk and compliance. A lot of the other offerings that exist out there are really focused just on the compliance piece of it, but don't have that marriage of a risk statement to that. So you can see that integration between risk and compliance. You just kindly go back a quick slide, Will. One of the things just to kind of also note is that this is really, like I mentioned before, this is really a journey, if you will. FTB's taken some fantastic steps on this journey, if you will, as it relates to setting the foundation of your harmonized risk and compliance, your risk register, risk methodology, et cetera. Beginning to survey IT and the agencies, through that step 2, if you will, by setting up the applicability matrix, sending out the SSPs, et cetera. There's a lot of other opportunities to leverage, if you will, integrated risk management functionality as it relates to something that we call a decision engine. This is really, think about this as the ability to do an intake form and say, I want to go onboard a new application, for example, or I want to go move a workload, for example, that has PII into the cloud. Well, you might need to know what are the data classification ratings or controls that you need to have now on that application or workload. There's the ability to leverage those foundations previously set and then empower what we call the builders, or those that are onboarding applications, through a decision engine technique. The ability to do more detailed audit and compliance testing, if you will, leveraging the audit management functionality in ServiceNow, where you set up an engagement, do your design and operating effectiveness testing, as well as the ability to be proactive as it relates to automating evidence collection, if you will, of using an evidence warehouse functionality and evidence request workflows, and linking those evidence and attachments, back to controls, if you will. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar who have been part of and subject to audits, if you will. You feel like you're always providing and being requested information, if you will, to support an audit. This is the ability to try to make that a bit more proactive and self-service, by sending out proactive requests to collect evidence, inventory it accordingly, and then allow folks to use the evidence warehouse functionality to look for the artifacts that they need for their relevant audits. So a lot of opportunity here, and really where I think this leads us until we're going to see if there's any remaining Q&A that we have in the final minutes, is that we set this up from the beginning as a multiple part series, and that this is really just step 1 in the journey. FTB has taken a fantastic step, if you will, as it relates to getting up and running with ServiceNow Integrated Risk Management. But there's a lot of other opportunities to do, whether it's continuing the IRM GRC journey, whether it's thinking about things as it relates to vendor risk management, business continuity management, or security operations, as well as the rest of the ServiceNow platform. So what we're going to be doing is sending out, first, soliciting any feedback that you have from today's session. We definitely want to hear that from you. But also, as we start to look out to our part 2 and part 3 of this webinar series, we want to understand, what is really top of mind for all of you and what would you like to see a similar session on that we can look to then bring to life for you. ServiceNow has their knowledge session that is coming up in the May timeframe, if you will. So we'll be looking to do our part 2 webinar in the early June timeframe. We'll look to get that on your calendars as soon as possible. And we really appreciate in advance if you can look out for that survey we'll be sending so that we can understand, what topics you would like us to include for that.
And we
So with
did
that, I'm going to pause here and clip any other questions that have come up that we want to cover.
Yeah, we have a question about exporting POAMs. So basically, does it need to be done individually, or could a group of POAMs be exported out to Excel?
A group of POAMs could be exported out to Excel.
Yeah, and just to be clear, basically what happens is because the data is available, anybody who has access would be able to run a report that would gather whatever information you need, and then they could export that out to Excel. And that's all done with configuration. It does not have to do any configuration. So that's all native functionality. It's just a matter of setting it so that it supports it properly. And then next question is about data mapping. And I'll take this one. We do have functionality around data mapping, especially as it comes to privacy, like a DPIA or some other things like that. So we have I believe the next slide has some contact information. So feel free to reach out to either Keith or Rebecca here, and we will be able to send that out.
Yeah, Cliff, just following up, this is Keith Halgard. I'm one of the directors for ServiceNow supporting the state of California account. We'll make a point to get both the recording as well as the presentation sent out to all of the attendees. The presentation is probably going to be a little on the heavy side, so we will post that out as a link that you can pull it down from. So if there's any immediate questions, do not hesitate. You can reach out to myself or Rebecca, and we can take those immediate questions and work with you to get them addressed.
Alrighty, I don't see any other questions coming in. So with that, I think we could go ahead and move forward.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
so I think
we'll please.
Yeah, exactly. And then, hey, Brian, we'll plan on just keeping that line open for a few minutes afterwards. If anybody wants to straggle and ask some individual questions, we'll be happy to address those once you wrap up. So we'll keep the bridge open until there's a period of inactivity, and then we'll close it down.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time this morning. We look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you. Be on the lookout for the survey link that we are going to send out so we can understand what, any feedback you have and what you would like to cover in the follow-on sessions. And special thanks to Vivian for joining us today and sharing your story and the experience of getting up and running with ServiceNow IRM and working with the Vets and Edgile team. So thank you.